So, Simon Goodwin has been sacked by the Melbourne Football Club. Now, I know this is the Carlton fan channel, and I know that this is Blue Abroad, but I can't help but feel that this story is somehow getting the mind ticking over and over for Carlton supporters and maybe even the Carlton Football Club and the decision makers there, because I see similarities between the clubs, and in this video I want to unpack some of those similarities and open up the discussion around what exactly is Carlton going to do moving forward. So obviously lots of similarities in this situation. Firstly, Simon Goodwin and Michael Voss were both contracted until the end of 2026. There was a school of thought that the D's would honour Simon Goodwin's contract, and there is a school of thought that the Blues are still undecided about what to do with Michael Voss going into next year. You've got a contracted coach, so you've got a commitment there, but this is sport, and more specifically, this is Carlton. It would not be the first time that this club has cut ties with a coach, irrespective of a contract. So there's that situation. We're talking about two teams that have actually played in a similar way. The league in general has gone from putting up the likes of Cripps and Oliver in the lights, and now you start seeing these new school of players take the shine. So you've got your Wanganeen Millera, you've got your Max Holmes, Bailey Smith, Jordan Dawson to an extent, these types. So the powerful, contested, defensively sound game style versus the speed, ball movement, outside polish, score off turnover, transition. And it almost seems like the Blues and the D's sit at one end, and the Crows and the Pies and the Lions to an extent sit at the other end, and everyone else might be somewhere in between. And now we seemingly are both exposed to a league that's shifted, and it's shifted pretty quickly, and I think we've seen that. So I want to think about it a bit. Is this just a trend in the game? Will it last for a year or two? Will it move quickly? Or is this going to be something that's permanent? Will finals football come around and the game and the brutality of the game and the contested style of the game come to the fore? And will we hear contest and defense in the finals like what we do for the majority of our time as Carlton supporters? You've also got this impending change off the field. So the D's, they've got an interim CEO, a transitioning board. The Blues, we have almost like an interim CEO. We kind of have two CEOs. We've got the current CEO, we've got the incoming CEO. We've already elected a new president, unless something changes in the off season. So there's changes coming off the field there. There's also a football department which is changing. And I guess one of the key points here is that Melbourne seemingly now have acted. And it's almost like Carlton have just been biding their time and waiting and thinking about exactly what needs to be done, making sure that they make calm and measured decisions. And maybe that's part of the issue. Maybe it's not. On the one hand, when this football club, the Blues, when the Carlton Football Club thinks too long, on the field, it invites pressure. Off the field, it invites indecision. And when that pressure comes and it builds, eventually it crumbles. That's my experience. So whether it's on the field or off the field, to be fair, in this situation, they set out a date for the CEO transition as the 15th of August. And they also set out this rhetoric when I spoke to Rob Priestley around wanting to make sure that they made calm and measured decisions. And that's something that they haven't done a lot of in my experience as a supporter. So if we circle back to the last time we went through this sort of failure on field and failure of we'll call it a regime, got rid of Brendan Bolton, installed David Teague. They seemingly moved. They called an external review. They knew that Teague wouldn't be there, and it was what it was. We've sacked coaches mid-season. We've waited to end of season. I think we've done it all. So I don't know what the right way to go about it is. The reality is Melbourne has made its move. And so the first question in this video that I want to pose to you is, do you think that Carlton will honour the contract with Michael Voss for 2026. And the issue with that opens up another layer to the story, because we've spoken about it on the channel and throughout all the shows. If you go forward with the current coach and he's contracted for one more year, what does that conversation look like with your potential new assistants or your beefed up football department or whatever you're going to do? What does that conversation look like for players who you're trying to get to stay, or players who you're trying to bring into the club via free agency or potentially in the trade period? So from that lens, it's almost like if you're going to keep Voss and move forward with Voss for the short to long term, you might need to extend him, because going into next year with that 1 year deal or 1 year remaining on a contract, that can't be a good look. That can't be good for anyone involved, because whether we like it or not, the pressure of the Carlton Football Club is immense, both from an internal point of view inside the club and an external point of view outside the club. Whether you want to group mainstream media and fans as external, however you want to look at it, the pressure will be there. But I guess the real question is around what's the philosophy of the game. So I think the key issue here where I think Carlton is stuck, and where a lot of us are stuck, because I see it just from the conversation amongst us, amongst the fan base, is do we need to decide if we want to move into this trend of modern football when we already play this contested style of footy, which is really the antithesis of what the modern game is doing? Will the game stay like this? Will the game present itself into this basketball style of game for a trend for a little while, and then will it swing backwards? And if it will swing backwards, will we then be ahead of the trend where other teams are moving into the modern way, but then eventually the game of football evens itself out? And that's the key question. And that's where I think potentially the indecision is coming from. That's my view. I personally think we've got a pretty good handle on this contested style. I think we need to add the layer of the modern game as opposed to move fully into the modern game. The issue that we clearly are having in 2025, and maybe even before that, but let's just call it 2025, in order to beat this quick modern game, you need to be elite at the contest, which I think we are pretty good at the contest. But you need to be good for most of the game, if not all of it. Can't lose the clearance battle. You can't lose the contested possession battle. You have to win that battle. You got to have really high endurance and physical resilience. And this might be part of the other issue here, because the bodies are breaking down. There's an argument to say that the game style is too taxing and therefore the bodies are breaking down. And because the bodies are breaking down, we just can't hold on for long enough in games. And if you look at the pattern of 2025, I think it's 6 games that we've led at halftime and we've lost. So clearly we're not able to sustain it for long enough. Now, this is the next part. Are we close and we just add a little bit more and then we're about to get there? Or are we just going down a path to a dead end that's just not going to work? The other thing that's important is to have clean execution under pressure, which Carlton do not have. Because when that pressure comes, and it could only be a 10 or a 12-minute spurt, it just seems like the dam wall opens. And all the hard work that can be done in a full half of football can be undone in 10 to 12 minutes. And that's been a big issue. I recall the Collingwood game. I recall the Hawthorn game. And you can even talk about the Freo game that's just passed. Short amount of time and the game blew wide open. So for Carlton, you can play a slower, contested, territory-based style of game, which is what we do for 4 quarters. But you have to be able to control from the first bounce to the final siren. So it's got to be on our terms. And footy very rarely is on your terms for 4 quarters. You got to it leaves no margin for scoring inefficiency. And unfortunately, we are pretty inefficient when it comes to scoring, whether it's setting up opportunities to score or actually converting those opportunities that we do create and turning them into goals. And you've got to be able to withstand the pressure when the game flips to chaos. And that's what's happening. Carlton will play 2.5 quarters of pretty good footy, to be fair. They'll grind. But then as soon as it's time to start thinking about the game and being a bit more methodical, or the opposition inject that speed and chaos into the game, we become exposed. And I think it's partly because the club haven't fully committed to the new wave, but it also is because we can't really execute the old wave, we'll call it, or the original wave. So that's the real question here. Does Carlton want to double down on the contested, control-based style of footy, or does it want to invest in what the competition is already doing? And that's the speed, movement, and the risk. Staying in between is the issue. It's not just outdated, it's dangerous. So back to the original question. There's actually a few questions in this video. It's just such a fascinating domino that's happened here with Simon Goodwin. And it's making me wonder, what are the Blues going to do with Voss and this department? And everyone's asking the same question. I'm filming this on the 5th of August, 2025. So in 10 days' time, the CEO will take over. Is a decision going to be made on the coach straight away? Don't know. But I want to open up the discussion for you in the comments below. Where do you think the game is going? Do you think this modern trend of football is just that, a trend, and it'll, the pendulum will swing back and the contested, slow, methodical way of playing will rear its head back? If so, when? And I guess that forms the next part of the question. What do you think is the right move for the coaching department? And do you have any alternatives for a coach who can actually implement a balance between this modern style of football and, we'll call it, the original style of football? I haven't got a better word for it. Fascinated to see your thoughts and read through them and engage with them. We'll go from there.